Okay, good evening, everybody. It's fantastic to see everyone. Welcome to the second Dr. Zadoff's final exam review, the final exam. Dun, dun, dun. I hope everyone had a nice Chag. I hope everyone had a nice Shavuot. I hope everyone had a nice long weekend. I hope everyone was able to study. I hope everyone was able to spend some time studying. I want to thank everyone who showed up to Romer on Saturday night. We had a nice hour and a half chat or so. Some people from other classes joining us as well. It was a lot of fun. So thank you for coming on Saturday night. I think we had a good time. I think it was very informative. For those who weren't there, yes, I did give away all of the answers to the exams. The answer sheet was given out at the at this thing on Saturday night. Yeah, so it was a great time. But yeah, I hope everyone was able to spend time studying. Test is tomorrow. That's how crazy it is. Crazy. Everyone's freaking out. Test. Calm down. Relax. It's going to be okay. I can talk in very calming tunes if that's what you'd like. I can play some nice spa music in the background for everyone to listen to so we can all just settle down and relax. Everything's going to be okay. Don't worry, etc., etc. Okay. We're going to spend an hour tonight, as I said. This is going to go from 8 to 9, as opposed to 2 hours, which we did last week. We're going to spend an hour doing this tonight. Of course, the evening cannot begin without thanking our sponsors. First of all, Apple. Thank you to Apple for sponsoring this event tonight. Thank you to iced coffee, Nespresso iced coffee. And of course, this evening is sponsored by the letter H. H for history. H for history. Okay. We already have a lot of questions I could see here. Wow. Questions from Nina and Tamira asked a bunch of questions here. She also emailed me a list of 21 questions to go over. I don't think we're going to get to all of those questions, Tamira, but thank you for emailing me those questions. I think, yeah, it's good to see that you're preparing. Okay. There are a lot of questions here, so let's get to it. Let's just start with this question from Tamira. How and when did the Roman Empire fall? That's not really our, we're not really focused on the fall of the Roman Empire here. The Roman Empire falls in the 5th century. It doesn't just happen in one day, but it comes about as a series of both external causes, specifically from invasions by Germanic tribes, and for various internal reasons, such as various economic reasons. But the 5th century is when the Roman Empire falls. Historians debate as to the date, whether it's 415, 432, 468. There are a lot of different dates as to when historians say the Roman Empire falls. It's not important for this exam, but the only importance are the consequences of that fall. Okay. All right, that's one question dealt with here. Let's take another question. We basically have questions from Nina and Samira. Oh, there's one from Michal. Let's take one, if I can find one by Nina here. Let's see. Let's see here. This is from Nina. Okay. In the essay question that analyzes, that's not spelled correctly, minus 10 points for that. Oh, by the way, and I should have mentioned this before, the YouTube video, only something like 200 or some odd views. If you guys want to get to 100,000 by tomorrow, you really need to pick up the pace. So, start calling friends, start doing things like that. Start thinking about that if you really want the extra 15 points. Okay. In the essay question that analyzes Mark Bloch's description of feudalism, you said to include at least one critique of his analysis. What do you mean by this? Does it have to be a negative critique? Critique is by definition negative. What you should do in writing the essay and thinking about the essay is what doesn't Mark Bloch address, or what is the deficiency in his arguments. That's what you should be thinking about. It's not simply what is this argument and analyze his arguments, but in thinking about his arguments, I want you to think about the deficiencies. I want you to think about what is wrong with the arguments. If you were thinking about his arguments, in what way would you, as the historian, say and see that Mark Bloch's argument was wrong and incorrect? So that's what I mean by a critique. And then a critique is a negative critique, because a critique by definition is telling you that what you're doing is incorrect. Okay, let's see. Let's now take another question. Let's see. This is from Michal. Can you go over the Holy Roman Empire? Okay. Charlemagne is made Holy Roman Emperor by the Pope when he's coronated in Rome in the year 800. The Holy Roman Empire is basically what we consider today to be Germany. There was no there was no single country called Germany, as we saw in regards to Charlemagne's grandchildren with the Treaty of Verdun. Germany is split actually really in half. Part of it is given to Louis the German, part of it is given to Lothar. And Charles the Bald and his descendants get what is today basically modern France. But Holy Roman Empire is the area that what is today Germany. We're not going to talk. We really didn't talk about what the Holy Roman Empire looked like from a political scene. It wasn't a single empire. It was a bunch of different, basically city-states, and these city-states had what were called electors that elected the king and elected the Holy Roman Empire. But in terms of what we discussed in class, we didn't talk about that in class in any detail. In fact, that's going to be that will be part of what we discuss beginning in sophomore year history. But in regards to what we did talk about in the Holy Roman Empire, we talked about the investiture controversy. So that's one thing you should know that is involving the Holy Roman Emperor. But that's one element. We talked briefly about the Holy Roman Emperor in regards to the Crusades. That's basically it. We talked a little bit of the Holy Roman Empire in terms of trade, but that's basically it. Okay. All right, let's take another question. Okay, this is from Samira. Can you please explain the source by Jeremy Cohn? Okay, so this is the source that we read when we were discussing the Crusades, and we were talking about the question of when we were talking about the Jewish First Crusade Chronicles. And what Jeremy Cohn does in the source that we read is that he lays out the two different historiographical views of how to understand, of how to analyze the Jewish First Crusade Chronicles. Are we, and this is what Jeremy Cohn is doing in this primary source, or the secondary source, excuse me, are we to take what the Hebrew Chronicles say as events that took place according to the way in which the Chronicle records them? Meaning, do the Chronicles record absolute and complete fact? That's the position that Robert Chazen adopts. On the other hand, the other position to take is that what the Hebrew First Crusade Chronicles present is not to be taken as 100% factual. They represent events, but not necessarily actually true events. Rather, they reflect what the author saw, what the author wanted to get across. Some of the details are probably inventions. What's important is the meaning behind the stories, the meaning behind the martyrdom, the meanings of the specific characters that appear in the story, their actions, what they do, how they do it. Their description of the meaning is more important than actually what happened. Again, according to Robert Chazen, what actually happened is actually the proof of why these Hebrew Chronicles are to be taken at their word. What we see, according to Chazen, is a great variety of sources, a great variety of action. We don't see a singular action. We see a variety of actions. We see different names. We don't see the same names, the same people appearing. That, according to Chazen, is proof as to why this is why this should be accepted as factual. So that's what the Jeremy Cohn source is doing. I hope that's clear. All right, let's move on. Let's take another question here. Um, Still a lot of questions. Just looking for a particular one I saw before from Nina. Okay, here. In the reading, Salah discusses some sort of emancipation. I know emancipation means to free, but what is he talking about the Jews being freed from? What he's talking about specifically is, in terms of emancipation, is giving the full rights of citizenship to Jews in Europe. The idea of emancipation, yes, to emancipate means to free, exactly. But what Barun is talking about when it comes to emancipation, specifically concerning the Jews, is giving the Jews the full freedom of being a citizen, of being accepted as a citizen, giving them rights of citizenship, giving them full and complete opportunity to show that the Jew is basically the same as an average German or as an average Frenchman. They have no limitations. They're not limited because of the religion that they practice. Emancipation is going to be an important development specifically for Jews beginning at the very, very end of the 18th century, continuing into the 19th century. And for Baron, when he's talking about emancipation, and he's talking about the guarantee of citizenship, the guarantee of freedom, that is a marker between the Middle Ages when Jews are persecuted and when Jews are limited to when they are not. And the question that Baron is really talking about, and the question that the reading gets to, is emancipation really a dramatic change for the positive? That's the question. Were the Middle Ages so terrible that when Jews get emancipated, all of a sudden things are better for them? And that's really the core issue that Baron is trying to get to, is trying to understand. And what he shows, and what he tries to prove in a way, is that for Jews in the Middle Ages, it wasn't that terrible. It wasn't that bad. And in fact, when Jews are emancipated, and the reading doesn't go into this in such detail, but when Jews are emancipated, it's not so great for them. But that basically is what he means by emancipation. Good. Moving through these questions. Let's see. Question from Michal: how and when does the Great Schism of 1054 end? It doesn't. The Great Schism of 1054 still exists today. There is a separation between the Eastern Church and the Western Church. That separation has never been resolved. Okay. Okay, there's some questions in the email here. I'm not gonna, there's some questions here that I'm just not gonna go over right now because we went over it in detail, in a lot of detail in the last Google Hangout. I'm not gonna repeat it in such detail because I want to try to get some new questions or things we didn't talk about. So for instance, Nava, you're asking about the Sui, Tang, and Song dynasties. I spent a lot of time on that in the last Hangout, and there were a couple of questions on that. So, and that's also, yeah. Again, I went over this in detail. If I have time at the end, we'll go over it, but we spent a lot of time talking about that in the last Hangout. So I'm going to leave that for now and not really handle that. All right, just a couple of questions from Milana from the email. Do we need to know every pope and king you mentioned in class? In theory, but what I would say is focus on the kings and the popes that we discussed significantly, that had significant impact on elements that we discussed, whether it's Urban II, whether it's Gregory VII, whether it's Innocent III. There are a lot of there are popes and kings that we mentioned in class that we gave that we really focused on. I think you should really try to focus on that. Do we need to know years or order? You need to know order. Yeah, I mean, you need to know order. I mean, we talked the Middle Ages. We discussed the Middle Ages really thematically, not really chronologically. So yeah, you need to know order. Dates, again, I'm not gonna. If you tell me that the Great Schism happens in 1056 or 1058, not 1054, nothing's gonna happen to you. If you tell me that the Great Schism between the Eastern and Western churches takes place in the 13th century, that's going to be a problem. So you need to be general to a point in regards to those dates. If you tell me the First Crusade happens in 1096, great. If you tell me it happened, or if you tell me it happens in 1092, okay. If you tell me it happens in 950, that's a problem. Okay, so let me just go back to some of these questions here. Can you name the rabbis that are relevant to the Middle Ages and the changes they caused within the church? I mean, there aren't really rabbis who caused change within the church. So I'm not really sure what you mean by that, Alana. So, okay, I'll come back to some of your email questions. Will my wife be making an appearance, or is she being a party animal again? She's actually a party animal again. This is strange. She's at a work party tonight. She's actually at a work party. She may be coming home before the night is done, so we'll see. But crazy as it sounds, she's actually at another party tonight. Yeah, she has a fantastic. I'm here talking to you guys, and she's out partying like nothing. So, priorities, guys. That's the thing. All right, let's go back to some of our questions here. Let's see, from Tamira. Do we need to know about Genghis Khan's descendants? We talked about the answer to your question is yes, just in regards to what they did specifically in invading parts of the the Abbasid Caliphate, bringing the Abbasid Caliphate down. In their invasions of Russia, and the fact that, or the existence of the 4 Khanates, the 4 different Khan kingdoms. But that's really the extent. We didn't go into it in such great detail in terms of the actions taken by the descendants of Genghis Khan. Okay. Let's see. See, another question from Samira. Who took over France and England after William of Normandy? Well, William of Normandy takes over England. William of Normandy conquers England, William the Conqueror. And France, there's a king of France, but remember, France is still very much a fractured kingdom. It's very much a fractured nation with very powerful lords. So over the course of between 1066 and the 100 Years' War, France is able to assert more power, but I think that basically answers the question. Okay. To follow up from Tamira, do we need to know the names of the 4 different Khanates? No. Okay. Just to go back. Fine. Good. Just checking the email. All right, another question from Tamira. How successful was the King's Crusade? Not successful. The 3 kings who go out on the King's Crusade, their armies have to face up against Saladin the Magnificent. Saladin is a very powerful and a very well-versed Saladin. Yeah, excuse me, Saladin the Great. He's a very powerful general. He was able to defeat them. The 3 kings is able to hold the lines against the crusading armies, and they are unsuccessful in reconquering the lands that had been lost to the Islamic armies in the Holy Land. So it was not successful. Furthermore, when Richard the Lionheart makes his way back from the Middle East to England, he is captured and thrown into prison and needs to be ransomed afterwards. So not successful. Okay. Again, from Tamira, what should I do if you're not going to answer all of my questions? There's a good chance I'm not going to answer all of your questions, Tamira. I think you should bow your head and weep. No, I'm kidding. I don't know. I don't have an answer for you. Sorry. Okay, more questions here. This is from Eliana. Why does Salo Baron mention America? That's a good question. Let me take a look at the reading for a second. America. He's talking about America simply from a population period. Yeah. There's no way there's Jewish population increase. Jewish population did not exceed fine. I mean, he's just talking about the rate of Jewish population increase from the middle of the 17th century through the beginning of the 20th century, and saying why it. I mean, he's mentioning America because America was being built as a center for Jewish life, as European Jews were building up their community, and that's probably why the number of Jews in Europe doesn't rise even greater than it does between 1615 and 1700. I think that's the best I can do there in terms of answering the question. All right, going back to the email for some questions. From Alana, last time you said that disputes about the Talmud's intentions changed the church's tolerance or the Jews despite the okay. Right. So going back to the question about the rabbis, last time you said that disputes about the Talmud's intentions. Right, but that's not the rabbis. That's that you're really talking about the Paris disputation and the realization as a result of the charge made against the Talmud. That the Jews have elevated the Talmud, and the Talmud speaks very ill of Jesus, Christianity, of Mary, etc. That's the fact that's the church coming to the realization that that what they had, what has happened, or what the Talmud is more important than the Bible. It's nothing to do with the rabbis specifically. It's the realization by the church that the Talmud has greater significance than the Bible, and it's the Jews have elevated the Talmud, and the Talmud itself speaks very ill of Christianity, of Jesus, and the Talmud needs to be put on trial, and therefore the Jews and therefore the church at that point changes its perception of the Jews as not Jews of the Bible, but Jews of the Talmud, not Jews whose focus is squarely on Bible and biblical interpretation, but rather the focus on the fact that Jews study and learn the Talmud as their primary source. That's the thing in regards to talking about the rabbis. Okay. Whew, sorry, I'm just looking for a quick thing here. Okay. All right. A question from Michal. Regarding the concordance of worms, what does it mean to invest in the clergy? In what ways will the nobility and papacy be investing in the clergy? It's not investing in a monetary sense. The term invest here means to invest is a method by which the bishop or those who the member of the church is being given his power. To invest literally means to put it into. So in this case, the person who is going to take power is being given his power, and the question is, who gives him that power? Is it the church or is it the state? That's the question. So the in regards to the investiture, that's what the major issue of the investiture controversy is all about. Is it the church or is it the king? The concordance of worms basically divvies out the power of investment, meaning the church is given the power of investments from a religious perspective, and that is seen as the more important of the two. The state, the king, is also given that opportunity. The Holy Roman Emperor is also given that opportunity to invest the member of the clergy, but only for the member of the clergy who's going to be working in or is going to be a part of the Holy Roman Empire and is going to be given the opportunity to lead Christians in the Holy Roman Empire. So It's split, but again, the purpose of investiture, investments, is who gives the person power. All right, more questions. Okay, from Tamira. What was the significance of Mark Bloch distinguishing two separate feudal ages? Well, what Mark Bloch is doing is that he sees that over a period of time, the relative power of kings grows. The first, the first feudal age for Mark Bloch is partly defined by a breakdown of central authority, the rise of nobilities, the rise of landed nobilities, of wealthy nobles. The change, or a change, comes about in Mark Bloch's mind, whether it's in the middle of the 11th century, whether it's the very beginning of the 12th century, where central authority begins to assert more dominance, assert more control. And for Mark Bloch, that's the beginning of a second feudal age. So the significance of two feudal ages comes about in Mark Bloch's minds from a re-emphasis on centralizing power, on kings being not only the noble who, or not being the lord who receives homage from all of his nobles, and that homage really means very little, but actually having real authority and real power. And that's the major element. Now, in other regards, Mark Bloch sees a change in economic behavior. The economic revolution for Mark Bloch was, at least beginning at the very beginning of the 12th century, was also a change towards the second feudal model. So those are the significant elements. All right. Let's see. I'm just going to take a look at the reading for 1 second. All right, so let's see here. Answer a question from Tamira. What is the difference between the reasons that the Reform and Zionist community viewed the Middle Ages as a negative time period for the Jews according to Sela Baron? They're actually very similar to each other. Both Reform and the Reform movement in the Zionist community in the 19th, early 20th centuries wanted to see the Middle Ages as a dark period for the Jews. The difference really has to do with the fact of the focus. The focus of the Reform Jews was that the focus of Reform Jewry in the 19th century was that Jews during the Middle Ages were insular in their religion. But now Jews need to be acculturated. We need to be a part of culture. We need to embrace, whether it's German or French or Austrian or Hungarian culture, and we need to be a part of that culture. We're French first, we're Jewish second. In the Middle Ages, for the Reform Jews, we were defined by our religion. We were defined by our religious community. We were defined by being a part of that religious community, and we couldn't be Frenchmen. And that's what emancipation brought, and that's why the Middle Ages is so different than emancipation. For the Zionists saw the goal of Zionism, of course, was to create a Jewish homeland for the Jews in the state, or in the land of Israel. The Middle Ages was defined by exile. The Middle Ages was defined by Jews being out of their home. So the Middle Ages, by definition, is a negative time, is a bad time, is a bad period, because the Jews didn't have the capabilities to be living in their homeland. So for the Zionists, the Middle Ages represents exile. It represents galut. It represents very much the fact that he says here, normal life cannot be led by Jewry elsewhere than on its own soil, meaning you had to be in Israel. So they both see the Middle Ages as a as a negative time for the Jews, but the Reform see it as a negative time for the Jews because the Jews were outside of the culture in which they lived in, and for the Zionists, the Middle Ages was bad because the Jews were outside of their homeland. both of those elements changed in the 19th and the 20th centuries? Good. That's a good question. It's a difficult question. All right. All right. The Hanseatic League. The Hanseatic League, very simply, Mr. Bolton. Okay. The Hanseatic League, very simply, was an economic and a military league, an alliance, basically, an alliance of cities, of powerful cities. Cities largely in the northern part of Europe. Let me see. I can take it. Let me see. I can get an image up, I think. This would be kind of cool. See. 1 second. Let's see. There we go. So this is the Hanseatic League right here. It's pretty cool, right? Pretty cool stuff. So this is the Hanseatic League. These are cities in the north of Europe. So this is the North Sea over here. So London over here in England, Hamburg, Lübeck, Danzig. These are all German cities. Riga, Novgorod. So it was a military alliance, and it was an economic alliance, meaning these cities here agreed to trade almost exclusively with each other. They would bring goods from each other. That's what the Hanseatic League was. Good. Very cool stuff. All right. Now we're back to me. Yay. Yay. Fun stuff. All right. A question from Navin. How much detail do we need to know the Crusades? You need to know it in some detail. I mean, we talked about the First Crusade in a lot of detail, so you need to know that. In the last Google Hangout, we spent a lot of time talking about sort of the narrative of the First Crusade, so I'd go back and look at that. But yeah, you need to know the First Crusade in some detail. The Second and Third Crusades we didn't talk about in great detail, but you definitely need to know the elements that we mentioned in class, whether it was the Second Crusade, the Third Crusade. Obviously, a lot of details when it comes to both the First Crusade with the Crusade itself, the Crusade attacking the Jewish communities. In terms of what the Crusaders conquered, if you don't memorize the different counties and kingdoms that they established and the dates that they established it, that's fine. But you need to know in 1098 and 1099 they were successful in conquering large sections of the Middle East. If you don't remember that they conquered the county of Edessa, if you don't remember that they conquered Jerusalem in a specific year, fine. Okay, now just a break for some iced coffee, Nespresso iced coffee, one of our sponsors for this evening. Good stuff. And yes, if you're wondering, it is decaf. So don't worry. Okay. Let's get back to the questions. All right. This is from Eliana, getting back to what we were discussing before in regards to the reading. How are Zionists viewing the Middle Ages as bad? Or aren't they viewing more recent times leading up to 1948 as bad? Well, the Zionists are looking at the past and they're saying the Middle Ages was a time in which Jews weren't in their homelands. They didn't have the opportunity to be in their homelands. And as a result, that's bad. That's negative. Of course it's negative. It's not up to 1948 that the Zionists see as bad. Zionism as a movement really gets to start at the very end of the 19th century. Theodor Herzl and the various Zionist congresses get off the ground in the 1890s. The first major movement of trying to move Jews from Europe, specifically from Eastern Europe to Palestine, gets off the ground in the 1880s, the Chibat Zion movement. So it's from anything before that time is something negative because the Jews don't have the ability to be in their home. So yeah, the Middle Ages was a dark period for the Jews because they weren't living in their homeland. They didn't have the opportunity to live in their homeland, and as a result, they experience negative and they experience events. They experience things which may not have happened if they were living in their own land. Okay. From Tamira. How does Saul Baron possibly view the Inquisition as not a negative time for the Jews? Well, no, it was negative, but he doesn't see it in the all terrible, horrific nature that sometimes is ascribed to the Inquisition. Yes, the Inquisition was bad, but it was bad specifically for Jews in a select number of towns, in a select number of cities, in Spain, in Portugal, in the Iberian Peninsula. It didn't affect all Jews. Remember, the Inquisition didn't affect all Jews. The focus of the Inquisition was to root out those Jews or those individuals who were Jewish, they had converted to Christianity, and then they possibly had regressed back to Judaism. So the Inquisition didn't focus entirely or exclusively on Jews. They focused on a very select number of individuals who were Jewish, converted to Christianity, accepted Christianity, and then were either practicing Judaism again, or there were rumors that they were practicing Judaism. So it's a very specific group that underwent the harsh treatment in regards to the Inquisition. Okay, Eliana, what are the other sponsors for this evening? So besides Nespresso coffee is the best coffee in the world. It's better than Starbucks. It's better than Stumptown. It's better than any other coffee. Nespresso coffee, the best coffee. Nespresso. Apple, of course. This event couldn't have taken place without Apple. You're viewing this because of a MacBook Air. I have my iPhone. I have the iPad. So all of this is Apple, and of course the letter H for history. Very good question, Eliana. Okay. Let's see here. I still don't get Jeremy Cohen. That's what a lot of people say. Again, what Jeremy Cohen is doing is he's laying out two different arguments. He's laying out the arguments of Chazin and he's laying out the arguments of Ivan Marcus. And the arguments that they're laying out revolve around the question of, are the Hebrew First Crusade Chronicles, are they supposed to be taken as purely factual texts, or are they to mean something else? And is there greater depth behind simply understanding the words or understanding the text as describing something that happened? That's what Jeremy Cohen is laying out. All right. Let's see. This is from Ike. Do we have to agree with the opinion of Salo Baron? No, you don't. I don't remember if you have a question in regards to, you may, but no, you can disagree with Baron. It's fine. Sure. Okay. Oh, let's see, more questions. We are getting through these questions here. This is exciting. This is exciting here. More questions. Exciting. All right, let's take a look at more questions here. This is from Tamira. What were the events leading up to the 100-Year War? We talked about the 100-Year War in a lot of detail. We're not going to go into it in such great detail here. The events really focus on two things. First of all, a desire in France to finally rid themselves of English control of lands, partially because, remember, let's see if we can do this again here and see if I can find the map here. Yeah, this is good. We're going to do that screen share again. It's pretty cool. There we go. Cool stuff, guys, right? Cool stuff. This is live in living color. In living color. All right. So if you see on the map here, this part here, this area sort of in red, Aquitaine, Gascony, this area was controlled by England during the Middle Ages, all the way through the 14th century. The France here wanted to get rid of England here. And so the initial cause, or the initial lead up for the 100 Years' War, is a desire by England, by France, excuse me, to retain and to conquer all of this land over here that England's had control. Now back to me, haha. Okay, so again, that's the sort of the lead up. The immediate cause is the question as to who will become the succession crisis in France following the death of Charles IV. Remember, Charles IV dies. Charles IV is the son of King Philip IV of France. Charles IV is also the sister of Isabella of France. Isabella of France is, again, the daughter of the former King of France, the sister of the current King of France. You're going to remember Charles IV. And she is also the wife of the King of England, making her the Queen of England. And she is also the mother of the future King of England. So when her brother dies, when Charles IV dies, there was a succession crisis. There was no male heir. So Charles IV dies. He was succeeded by his cousin. And in truth, when Charles IV dies, the closest living relative was his nephew, was his sister's son, Edward III, who was the King of England. So in theory, he should have become king because he was the nearest male relative through his mother. But the problem was that he was the nearest male relative through his mother. And it was decided that in France that Edward was not able to inherit the throne through his mother. Now, he was fine with this for a while, but then he began to press his claim beginning in the 1330s, and that begins the 30 Years' War. That begins the 30 Years' War. The 100 Years' War, because he begins to press his claim to the dynasty. Okay. All right. Let's look at more questions. Very good question from Ariel. How many of the Ninja Turtles were artists during the Italian Renaissance? Good question. So Michelangelo, Raphael, Donatello, and Leonardo. They were all artists. Yeah, they were all artists. They all did different things. So Donatello was mostly mostly created sculptures, more so than creating works of art. Raphael also more sculptures than actually paintings, but they all did. They were all involved in the Italian Renaissance. Good question. Let's see. Another important question. Do you think Sidney Crosby cheats on face-offs? Yes, but that doesn't matter because the season is over. It's over. It doesn't matter anymore. So they won. Good for them. When will the Rangers win Stanley Cup? Another Stanley Cup. You guys don't remember 1994. I remember 1994. I was young, but I remember 1994 when the Rangers won the Stanley Cup. It was crazy. I hope it's not another 50 odd years until the next Stanley Cup. Okay. Let's see. We're going to take some more questions here. We have another about 15 minutes or so. Question from Ike. Were the Abbasids and the Umayyads the two important families in Islam? Yes. The Umayyads were the first, I guess, of the large families that take control. The Umayyads were able to assert dominance following the assassination of Ali. The Abbasids arise in the middle of the 8th century, around 750, to challenge the Umayyads. They want to what they wanted to restore Islam to what they thought was a necessary shift. Specifically, they wanted to bring Islam back to a more spiritual kingdom, and so they defeat the Umayyads. We talked about the reconciliation banquets that the Abbasids hold for the Umayyads, where the Abbasids, after taking over, basically, after taking over in Damascus, they invite the Umayyads for a meal, for a banquet, and they subsequently kill all of them at the banquets. And the Abbasids then move the center of power from Damascus to Baghdad. They have a different kind of leadership. They see the leadership defined by more so than anything else, harking back to looking to the actions taken by Muhammad. And so these are the first two important families in Islam. Don't forget Ali and the difference between Sunni and Shia Islam also. Okay, very good. Have I seen the new Ninja Turtles movie? I have not. Who is my favorite Ninja Turtles? I have not seen the new Ninja Turtles. I haven't seen the last two. I just haven't had time. It's terrible. I know. I watched them. I watched all of the earlier movies, and of course the cartoons. I grew up in Ninja Turtles, so I really do have to get back to looking at those, or watching those movies. But that's what the summer is for. Okay. Let's see. This is from Tamira. You didn't talk about the fall of Rome, but that is the first essay question. Again, the first essay question is not the fall of Rome; it's the consequences of the fall of Rome. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter that how Rome fell. All that matters is Rome is gone. So therefore, what happened? What are the consequences? What are the consequences of that fall? What are the consequences of the fall of the Han Dynasty? I don't care how they fell. I don't care what the causes were of their failure, why they failed. I'm interested in the consequences more. I'm interested in the consequences. Period. I'm not interested in how they fell or why they fell. Do I think Girardi's got to go? It's tough. It's really tough. Pitching has been better. Pitching has been a lot better. I'm happy with the pitching. It's other stuff which is not great. Sabathia is figuring out how to pitch, which is a good thing. Look, I mean, it's not his. I don't think it's his fault. I think he's doing the best he can with what he has, unfortunately. All right. Can we maybe continue this to 9:15? I don't know. It depends on when my wife gets home. So we'll see. Maybe. Maybe not. This is from Rebecca. In 622, was Muhammad invited by the Jewish tribes or the Bedouin tribes? In the Constitution of Medina, it says the Jewish tribes invited Muhammad, being class within Bedouins wanted a peaceful solution, so they invited Muhammad. Yes. No. It was the Bedouins not the Jews, but the Bedouins inviting Muhammad into Medina. It wasn't the Jewish tribes, it was the Bedouin tribes inviting Muhammad into Medina in order to find a solution, in order to find peaceful solutions between the Bedouin tribes themselves and to ensure the safety of the Bedouin tribes from the Jewish tribes. So yes, it was the Bedouin tribes and not the Jewish tribes. Thank you for that question. Okay. More questions. From Michal, is it safe to say that starting with the Crusades, the opinion on Jews took a turn? At first, no, I would say not. It is not safe to say that it was the Crusades. It's safe to say that the Crusades and subsequent events, specifically during the Second Crusade, the perception of the church doesn't change. If the perception of the church only really changes, I think, in my opinion, not until the 13th century. Now, there is a difference, and this is something we talked about at the last hangout, and this is something we discussed in class. There is a difference between popular perceptions and the perceptions of the church. Popular perceptions are the perceptions of Jews taken by commoners, by people who were involved in killing Jews during the First Crusade. Remember, it's not the church who were killing Jews during the First Crusade, it's the commoners. It's the perception adopted by individuals who make claims that Jews kill Christian children for their blood, specifically the ritual murder and the blood accusations. So in Norwich, in the 1080s, in other parts of England and in France in the 11th and the 12th centuries. So there's a difference between the two. The perception of the commoners isn't something that really shifts. It's a perspective that of hostility and anger against the Jews. For the church, though, the shift doesn't take place until the 13th century. All right. All right, so let me take some questions from the email. I'm also getting questions from carrier pigeons. So you can send your questions via carrier pigeons if you'd like to. You can send them by Telegram. I will be accepting them by Telegram. And if you have Morse code, I do have a Morse code machine here as well. Okay, so a couple questions from Alana. Can you, what were the points of the Third and Fourth Lateran Councils? Okay, Third Lateran Council, 1179. First of all, the focus of the council condemned a radical group of Christians called the Cathars. This is the beginning where we begin to see the church make or enact laws that are restricting Jewish actions. So the Third Lateran Council forbade Jews and Muslims from having Christian servants. It also stated that evidence in court given by a Christian in a case involving a Jew, the evidence given by a Christian in court was always to be accepted. So that is another important, that's another thing that the Third Lateran Council does as well. The Fourth Lateran Council, 1215, the biggest of these councils, a couple of important elements. Marriage becomes a sacrament. So marriage is being regulated by the church. The Jews are told that they're forced to wear special clothing. The Fourth Lateran Council requires annual penance. You must go and be forgiven of your sins every year. Those are the major elements of the Third and Fourth Lateran Council. Going back to Alana's question, what were the goals of the King's and Children's Crusades? The goal of the King's Crusade was to reclaim land in the Holy Land that had fallen to Muslims, that the Christians wanted to reclaim as their own. Land that they had conquered during the First Crusade in 1099, but then had lost to the Muslims in following years. That was the goal. The Children's Crusade, again, the point of the Children's Crusade was to reclaim land in the Holy Land to defeat the Muslims, but the Children's Crusade was an utter failure. Can you compare the American Revolution to the 100 Years' War in the sense that in both cases a country wants to break away from France? The American Revolution is not the United States breaking away from France. It's the United States breaking away from Britain. So I would not call that similar. Are we expected to grade on grammar? Yeah. So I'm not doing the best possible essay. So we do that for every answer if we're also worrying about grammar. I want to see a well-written essay. I'm not going to be looking for misplaced commas. I'm not going to be looking for all run-on sentences. But what the point of having the essay in advance was for you to be able to think of and to create actual thoughts, as opposed to just writing ramblings, but to come up with a structure, to come up with an idea, and to plan ahead and to put that on paper, so that when you're writing the essay, you're actually creating something that has structure, something that has ideas. If I see sentences that are not the best written, that can be better if they were polished, obviously I'm not going to take off. But if I see constant sort of if the essay becomes almost unintelligible, then that's going to be a problem. But if it doesn't get to that point, it's largely not going to be a problem. Okay. So there, Ilana, I hope that answered a bunch of your questions. All right. What did the Sunnis believe versus what the Shia believe? Okay, so this is getting to Islam. This is getting to the differences between Sunni and Shia. Sunnis are the vast majority of Muslims. The Sunnis believe in the historical development of of leaders following Muhammad. The they believe in the four leaders following the death of Muhammad. They accept the legitimacy of the succession from Muhammad. Most Sunnis believe that Muhammad did not appoint a successor before his death. This is a major point of contention between Sunni and Shia, because Shia believe that it was Ali who was appointed by Muhammad right before his death. Ali was to take up the position of leader of Islam. The leader imams, local leaders for Sunnis, are not political leaders necessarily, but they're leaders of the community in prayer. For Sunni Muslims, there's no basis in Islam for a hereditary privileged class of leaders. Meaning, for Sunnis don't believe that there was a chosen family or a chosen line who was going to rule Islam. For Shia, that was definitely the case. For Shia believed that Ali was the chosen one, and all of his successors, all of members of his family were to be successors, were to be the leaders. Espresso. So leadership, according to Sunnis, needs to be earned. It's not a birthright. And it's up to the people to give or to take away leadership. Again, not defined by birthright. Shia Muslims believe that the authority of the leader is infallible, meaning the leader of Islam, his authority comes from God. He's infallible. He's sinless. Imams or leaders are venerated. They're viewed as saints, and they do miracles, after they die. It's important for Shia Muslims to go to the tombs, the burial sites of former leaders, in order to pray for these leaders to intercede with God on your behalf. Sunni Muslims don't believe in this. So those are some of the major differences between Sunni and Shia. Okay, we're getting up to 9 o'clock. We can spend a couple of more minutes, but then I do need to go, and you guys need to study. Yay. Okay. Question from Rebecca. What is Jeremy Cohen's view? Does he agree with Chazin or Marcus? So Jeremy Cohen himself, his view is closer to Ivan Marcus than it is to Robert Chazin, in truth. But what we read from Jeremy Cohen is really laying out the positions of Chazin or Marcus and not really going into detail as to what Jeremy Cohen agrees with. But in truth, in the rest of the book from which that secondary source was taken, Jeremy Cohen basically lays out a position very similar to Ivan Marcus's. Another question from Rebecca. What are examples of times when the relationship between the church and state changes? The investiture controversy, the Crusades, the constitutions of Clarendon, what else? The rule of King John. You could talk about Eleanor of Aquitaine. All of those are examples when the relationship between church and state changes. Can you please explain Mark Bloch's view, because I still don't understand? No. I mean, that's the essay question. I'm not going to be answering the essay question for you. Okay, let's see. From Tamira. Can my critique be that I disagree with his definition of the second feudal age? I don't think that the state ever had actual power during the time of feudalism. Sure, you can do that. You should provide sort of an example, but I mean, you in order to sustain your argument, you need to show that there was no process of centralization. That's what you need to show, and I think that's a little hard to show. So if you can try, but what Mark Bloch, what the second feudal age of Mark Bloch is trying to, or what he's talking about, is a centralization of power, a centralization of power, whereas kings are beginning to try to assert more control, and in many instances they actually do. Now there are going to be some examples which run counter to that, whether it's King John in England, whether it's that's really it, basically. So if you have an example, you can show that it may not necessarily always be the case, but it's fairly tough to show that centralization wasn't happening. All right, this is fun. What is the Battle of Tours? The Battle of Tours was the Battle 732, where Charles Martel, the leader, the mayor of the palace of the Frankish Empire, defeats the Muslims and stops the advance of the Islamic armies into Europe, protecting Europe from the Muslims. Okay. What were the most significant things that William the Conqueror did? Besides conquering England, harrying of the North, the Domesday Book. Those are the two important elements that we discussed in regards to William the Conqueror. Okay. Oh, let's see. Okay. From Nina, do we need to have a negative critique of Mark Bloch's description of feudalism? What if we feel it's completely accurate? What I think you should do is try to find something that's wrong in his reasoning. Meaning, you can tell me in the essay, I think Mark Bloch's critique, I think Mark Bloch's conception is 100% correct. But if you were to provide a critique, if one was to provide a critique, this is a weak point in his argument. So you can agree with his argument, but at the same time providing for a specific critique. But I am going to expect in the essay that you will provide at least one critical element against Mark Bloch's thinking. Okay. Michal, in what ways the Eastern Orthodox Church and Catholic Church differ? They differ in a lot of ways, but we really didn't go into it in such great detail. So, so I'm not expecting you to know that as part of this. Oh, sure. I'm tired, guys. Samir, what do you mean by centralization? Can I prove that the central ruler, the king, have very little power? What I mean by centralization is the fact that the king is amassing more power. Remember, there's always a king of France. There's a king of France from the time of the Merovingians after the fall of Rome. There's always a king of France. The question is, what power does he have? And as we talked about, up really until the end of the 12th century, in many instances, the kings have actual very, very limited real power. The power is held by the nobility. The power is held by the nobles who have the land and who hold the land as a fief from the king. Yes, they hold the land as a fief from the king, but nevertheless, they still have the power. Centralization means the king and the royal kingdom, they are able to begin to amass more power. They're able to either conquer more land, as the case of Philip Augustus. Let me see if I can show you one other graphic just to illustrate that point. Let's see. Is this it? Here, let me show you, Tamira. Maybe this helps. Okay, we're going to do another one of these screen shares. Yay, screen shares. There we go. Here. This is the screen share, okay? So this is the territorial conquests of King Philip II of France. This is Philip Augustus, okay? The blue is the royal royal lands, okay? What he does is he spreads the royal lands out to a very, very large degree. So what I mean by centralization, meaning in 1180, this is the area of land that the King of France controls, okay? And all of this in green here is land that he has given as a fief to his vassals, meaning to the nobles. The area in red is land controlled by England, okay? Now look here in 1223, the blue is the areas of land, is the expansion of the areas of land of the king. He has expanded more lands. He has begun to centralize more power in himself. Again, all of this area in green, again, yes, that is land held by vassals, but over the course from 1180 to 1223, over those 43 years, he's able to amass more power and to bring more power into himself as the king, okay? Stop sharing and back to me. Hello. Okay, so what I mean by centralization, again, is centralizing power in the king himself. Okay, I'm going to take a couple of more, and then we're going to end this. Couple more questions here, and we're going to end this. So what was the harrying of the North that you just mentioned from William the Conqueror? The harrying of the North was one of the first actions that William the Conqueror takes to put down any possibility of rebellion in England. He orders his troops to go to the northern parts of England, which had been under the rule of the Danes for a while, that had their own separate kingdoms, and to bring it under his control. He had killed possibly upwards of 100,000 people in ensuring the dominance, the control of all of the areas in the northern part of England. Okay. Okay, take a couple of more questions here. Question from email from Alana. Would you say that the Middle Ages can be described as a constant struggle of the kings, either versus the church, nobility, or the people? Yeah, I mean, I think it's a look. I mean, we talked about the fact that the Middle Ages is very much is very structured. The church is structured, society is structured, and there is a constant struggle between those structures. So yeah, it is a constant struggle. I totally meant to write. This is from Alana again. I totally meant to write England, not France. Can you compare the American Revolution to the 100 Years' War, in which the sense of both cases couldn't be from France? I wouldn't, just because they're very, very different. They're different in the sense of at the most basic level, yes, they're similar. Some sort of landmass is trying to break away from England. The problem is that, again, in the context of the 100 Years' War, even though England controlled land in France, the King of England was still a vassal to the King of France. He still held that land because the King of France gave him that land as a fief. That wasn't the case with the United States in the 18th century. In the 18th century, we're talking a very different political situation for both England, for the United States. We're talking about they're very, very different, and I wouldn't go down that path to compare the two. Excuse me. Whew, okay. We'll take just one or two more, and we'll end it there. How was the Domesday Book beneficial? It was beneficial because it gave an accounting of William the Conqueror of all of the land in England, and who held that land, and where that land was located. What, for instance, what did it mean for the city or the town of Hertfordshire to have land? Who held that land? William the Conqueror needed to know who held that land, which family held that land. He needed to know it for tax purposes, meaning he needed to know how much tax he should be getting from these families who held land. So that was very important. Secondly, he also wanted to reward those who had helped him in his invasion of England. So he wanted to know where was the land, where was the good land, who held that land. And so that's why the Domesday Book is also beneficial, because it gives him a sense of where that land where their land was. Okay, good. We are going to end it here. So we answered a lot of questions tonight. Thank you for all the questions. I appreciate all the questions. Good luck studying. Get some sleep tonight, and I will see you guys tomorrow. I will be in there's going to be 2 rooms, I think, for those who have additional time and those who don't. Since you guys are my only 9th grade class, I don't have other classrooms to go to, so I will be around for questions during the test. So when you get the test tomorrow, don't freak out, just relax. You'll get the reading. You get the reading exactly how it appeared on Haiku. You'll get one of the 3 essay questions exactly how it appeared on the review sheet. And yeah, so there aren't going to really be any surprises. Again, you have to do 5 out of 6 questions for the reading, and then 6 out of 12, I believe, in the 3rd section, and you will have the opportunity to answer 1 question as extra credit in the 3rd section. So you can do 7 questions in that last part. Again, 1 question extra credit, you'll get up to additional 5 points, 1 essay question, and 5 out of 6 on the reading. So you will have plenty of time to complete the exam. Again, given that you've had the essay question, you've had the reading, you should have plenty of time to complete the exam tomorrow. All right, guys, thanks. This was fun. I'm glad this worked out. We have spent in total more than 3.5 hours doing a review on Google Hangout, and another hour and a half or so on Saturday night. So I think you guys will be ready. So good luck, and I'll see you guys bright and early tomorrow morning. Have a good night.